And we are back. Let's kick things off on Thursday Night Football, where we find only two teams have players starting tonight. Let's kick things off to Gavin's 4th-ranked Drake and Bake taking on Rammer's 11th-ranked Fields of Dreams, where we find that Gavin is off to a fantastic start, leading 24-13. Gavin finding some huge success in the tight end department with Tucker Kraft scoring 24 points when he was only projected 9 points, a huge boom from Kraft. Rammer, however, finding another slow week from Scary Terry, although better than last week, not what he's looking for tonight with only 10 points, and his kicker Matt Gay scoring 4. Still lots of play left, Gavin with a 65% chance of winning. We move on to Joey's 5th-ranked Ledin Akuano taking on Spencer's 7th-ranked Quan Solo, where we find the score in Joey's favor 19-14. Joey getting his feet wet early with Daniels yet again with another good game, scoring him 19, while Spencer as well finding himself with a good game from Josh Jacobs, yet again scoring 14 for another straight week. Both teams still lots of players left. Joey only finds himself with a 51% chance of winning. And with no Friday games in store for us, that means we move right into the Sunday slate. Let's get started. Moving into the first hour of football, we first find Zach's 2nd-ranked OJ Didn't Do It falling behind to Nick's 12th-ranked Jamarj Simpson with the score 40-23. For Zach, his main receivers moving into the second quarter can't find anything, as CD and Metcalf both land with 0 points, with Travion Henderson leaving the skilled players with 5.8 points. Zach is going to need to find something out of this receiver group if he wants to take some action here. We're looking at Nick, Jamar Chase finally proving why he's the #1 pick in this year's draft, with early big production as he finds himself with 13 points. Let's see if he can keep it up. Nick now with a 56% chance of winning. Let's move over now to Blake's 9th-ranked Taylor Park Boys taking on Howard's 3rd-ranked Mo Money Mahomey, where we find Blake leading 32-24. Where we find James Cook off to a very hot start, looking to repeat what he had done last week and maybe more, with 20 points before the second half of this ball game. Where for Howard, Jalen Waddle finds himself with an early touchdown for the Finns, leading 8 points so far. Some slow starts from CNC and Henry, but knowing them, they'll surely be able to pick things back up before it's all said and done. Blake now with a 61% chance of winning. Moving forward, let's take a look into Gavin and Rammer's matchup, where we see a huge change in win probability, with Gavin now having a 72% chance of winning. We find Malik Neighbors off to a hot start in the first quarter with 10 points off the rip, and Burrow as well finding himself a passing touchdown early, and 49ers defense standing strong with 11 as well. Rammer, on the other hand, finding himself with a strong showing with Gibbs finding a touchdown early, and same with Rome Odunze, as they find themselves with 20 points combined. However, breakout star Justin Fields with -1 points is not looking good. Fields is going to need to turn it around before this becomes ugly. Gavin leading 59-44. As we take another look into what appears to be yet another big win probability change, we find that Joey now leads 68-35, as Joey is now projected to win by 30 whole points, where we find hot starts to his core 3 receivers, Puka at 16, Amon-Ra at 11, and JSN at 7, where Spencer, like some others, are struggling to find some decent showings from their starters. Spencer is going to need to find something quick to stay competitive in this one. And now, it is time for the league's witching hour, where one man's trash can surely be another man's treasure. Thank you, Blake. Let's take a look at Devin's 8th-ranked 95ers, taking on Adam's #1-ranked Bucky and the Jets, where we find the score to be a measly 11-19 lead for Adam. Not too much to look at here just yet, as we see only 2 players for each team playing. However, for Adam, Josh Allen can find himself with 11 points starting the 4th quarter, but Njoku with a solid 8 for the tight end position. For Devin, he would find his 2 starters in Travis Hunter and DeAndre Swift with some slow starts. However, still lots of time left for these 2 teams, as Adam only has a 54% chance of winning. Moving on, let's take a look at Zach and Nick's matchup, where we see Nick still leading 87-69, with Nick now with a 65% chance of winning. Lamar able to find his groove late with 21 points, and Jamar Chase never stopping his production with 30 whole points so far. Nick even able to find a good value spot, with Chris Tillman finding the end zone as well. On the flip side of things, Zach is still struggling to find the same production he found last week, although ETN seems to be a bright spot in this lineup, putting up 16, and DK now able to find a touchdown late. CD and friends, however, need to find some production here late if Zach wants to find a chance of winning. Let's move over now to Jake's 6th ranked Silent But Genty taking on Trey's 10th ranked Texas A-Chan Massacre, where we find Jake leading this one to a close 49-44 game. Jake with a 53% chance of winning. With Tyreek Hill finally starting to show some promise at 12 points, we also find Caleb Williams as well with a decent 14. And with the Bears down as much as they are, Caleb looks to keep the production going as he's going to have to keep chucking that rock. Where we also find Trey's X-Factor, Devin A-Chan, with a tremendous 21 points. However, with the next leading scorer being Zay Flowers at 14, Trey looks to find some production, especially out of his star wide receiver Brian Thomas. We'll keep a close eye on this matchup moving forward as there is still lots of time left. Next, let's take a look over to Blake and Howitt, where Howitt leads 69-43. However, Blake still with the higher chance of winning with 67%. Blake, even with only 3 players starting, have put up an impressive amount of points, with James Cook leading the pack at an incredible 26 points, whereas Howitt seems to struggle a bit, as Henry and Wilson only combining for 8 points. However, Waddle and CMC seem to be doing the most of the heavy lifting, but he's going to need more in order to compete with Blake. Let's now move over to Gavin and Rammer, where Gavin now with an incredible 82% chance of winning as he leads 90-83. Even with an unfortunate Joe Burrow injury capping him at 7 points, Devontae Adams and Malik Neighbors find themselves both with 22 points, and with 2 stars in London and Hubbard still left to play, this could get ugly quick. However, Rammer would find success with Gibbs at 16 and Rome Odunze with a breakout game with 25 points and going. However, with Fields still struggling with 3 points and only 1 player left to play, it looks as though all hope may be lost soon. Only time will tell though, we've seen miracles happen before. Lastly, we will find Joey absolutely beating down on Spencer 110-46, with Joey now at an 87% chance of winning. Even with the core 3 with Puka, Amon, and JSN putting up combined 65 points, Javonte Williams still has something to prove, with 15 points of his own and possibly more to go. Strong starters all throughout, as Joey looks to have an incredible week of fantasy football. For Spencer, Jacobs would still be his leading scorer with 14, as his next closest would be Kamara with 9 points. Still, with Saquon and Kyler still left to play, anything is surely possible. Let's move forward on now to 4 o'clock, where we now see a huge change in win probability. Zach now with a 77% chance of winning, with the score 100-95 in Nick's favor. Zach ends up exploding with CeeDee Lamb finishing with 20 points, and let's not forget that kickers do matter, as Brandon Aubrey ends up with 24 of his own. With Zach only down 5 and Herbert and Bowers still left to play, this one could be over very soon. And even with Jamar Chase and Lamar Jackson combining for 62 points alone, everyone else essentially caps out at 10 points, and Cowboys defense actually hurting Nick, losing him 5 points. With Hawkinson still left to play, it only seems to be his hope. We now find Blake still projected to win, 70% in fact, as he still trails Howitt 90-54. Blake finds himself with a decent start from Jonathan Taylor at 8 points. However, Ingram and Sutton are still shooting blanks on the scoreboard. Blake is going to need to find some more production from them too if he wants this to stay close. On the flip side, we see Derrick Henry only finishing with 2 points somehow, as Garrett Wilson would struggle from Fields' outing with 9 as well. Even with Laporta's Lions scoring 52 points, he can only find himself 5 of his own. Howitt, with only Mahomes and Vikings defense left to play, needs something absolutely massive from them too if he wants to stay alive. Moving on to Joey and Spencer's matchup, we find that Joey is putting on an absolute spanking, as he now has a 99% chance to win, score showing 150-71. Amon-Ra with a massive 40-point performance, Puka and JSN also combining for 40, Javonte Williams with 25, and Ravens defense at 15. This is an absolute fantasy football masterclass. Not only that, but he still has Warren left to finish his game and 2 other players as well, where we find that Kamara would only turn up with 16. However, this is simply just too little, too late. Really nothing you can do anyways against such a strong outing. We're going to consider this game over. And spoiler alert, Kyle Pitts does not end up winning this game for Spencer. Final score, 160-105. Joey continues to power through his matchup so far, as he will now find himself second in this week's power ranking. Joey right now looks to be the team to beat, as he is absolutely loaded in the receiver department, absolutely carrying his squad. His running backs are still very questionable, however he can for sure use one of his receivers to acquire some new talent if need be. We then see Spencer moving down a spot, moving to 8th in the power rankings. It seems as though the old veteran presence in this locker room is not clicking, as everyone is starting to fall short. Hopefully they're able to turn it around before the impending doom. Let's move on to 6 o'clock as we now look at the outlook of Sunday Night Football. We see another huge change in the win projection, as Adam now with a 72% chance of winning, where we see the score 72-54 in Adam's favor. Although players like Swift and McBride put up solid games with 13 points, and Bo Nix having a bounce-back week with 20 as well, Broncos defense would unfortunately screw the pooch, giving away 5 points. While on the other hand, Cardinals defense with a touchdown helping lift Adam up, and Tet McMillan with a strong game as well with 16 points. Although nobody has necessarily shined, there is still lots of time left, with Devin's 3 biggest stars still left to play versus Adam's 3 biggest stars as well. Could we possibly see our miracle come back, or will Adam prove once again why he is ranked number 1? Moving along, we see yet another close matchup with Jake and Trey, where Jake is still only projected to win at 56%, score being 73-67 Jake. This game is turning into an absolute race to see whose team is more mid than the other. Jake, once again struggling to find points from his stars, is able to find some decent games from Tyreek and Caleb, both at 16, where we see Trey finding Achane with another big performance, carrying him with 26 on the night. Trey still with 3 players left to play, albeit one of them being Najee Harris. A poor Texans defense and a kicker could very well climb back. Only issue, the player still left for Jake is Ashton Jeanty, who is looking to make up for a shaky performance the week prior. We will find the final score of this one on Monday night. As we reach the end of Sunday Night Football, we find Adam increasing his odds to a now big 67% chance of winning, as he now leads 83-73. Even with Bijan's good game of 19 points, Devin is going to have to rely on Jacoby Myers and Omarion Hampton if he looks to come back. However, a decent game from Justin Jefferson helps give Adam the insurance he so desperately needs, as he looks for Egbuka and Bucky to help him finish the job. This game will be decided Monday night. Looking forward, we still find Nick leading 107-95, however Zach now at a whopping 97% chance of winning. With the Knicks teams now completely finished, we find Hawkinson can only muster up 2 points, not helping Nick out at all. Zach still down, looks for Bowers and Herbert Monday night to finish the job. Even with Zach still projected to be the clear winner, he's seen this before. And like last week, that wasn't necessarily the case. We will find the final score tomorrow night. Can Nick hold on? We take a look to find that Howitt's night is indeed finished, as the score remains 112-85 in Howitt's favor. However, Blake still with an 87% chance of winning. Howitt not being able to look for Vikings defense for insurance will have to rely on Blake's next few players to struggle. Players being Nico Collins, Mike Evans, and Baker Mayfield. Only down 27, all Blake needs is one decent performance, and this could be all over. We look to find the final score of this one on Monday night. Lastly, let's move over to Gavin and Rammer's matchup, where we find Gavin now at an astounding 99% chance of winning, score being 130-98. Even with Gavin finding Burrow down in the count, he is still able to find 130 points and counting, as he still has Fairbairn left to play. However, Rammer will need to find Ladd McConkey to not only find himself 30 points, but also somehow match Fairbairn's points as well. And for everyone's sake here, there's no need to find out what happens. It is not happening. Final score, 139-108. Gavin, able to bounce back from his unfortunate loss in week 1, is now able to capitalize on this momentum. Even with Joe Burrow out for the remaining 3+ months, Gavin looks to remain at spot number 4 on this week's power ranking. Gavin will have to be smart with who he fills in this role, but until then, he seems to be just fine. Where Rammer, still looking to find 100+ points in a week, looks to be in a rough spot. And with Justin Fields looking to return back to his former self, things could get ugly very soon, as he now actually goes up 1 spot to number 10 in this week's power ranking. Let's move on over now to Monday Night Mania. Let's take a look at the ending of the first game of the evening with Texans and Bucks, as Adam is now projected at a matchup high 76%, score being 114-73. Adam, with his night now finished, adds some nice insurance moving forward, where he finds Bucky and Egbuka combining for 30 points. Devin, now with 40 points left to conquer, remains to look for Omarion Hampton and Jakobi Meyers to save the day. A steep climb nonetheless, but if the chance of a potential shootout lies upon us, this game could very well look to be closer than we think. Can Devin pull off the upset? Let's take a look now into Jake and Trey's matchup, where we find the score to be as close as ever now, 73-72 in Jake's favor, and Jake still with a 61% chance of winning. Trey, adding some decent points from Texans D, helping Trey make this comeback, will now have to rely on Najee Harris and Cameron Dicker to somehow outscore Ashton Jeanty. With this being said, the outcome of this happening is, in my opinion, way out of reach. However, with the score being so close, there will be no fast forwarding, as we will see this game finish after the Monday Night Mania. Let's see if Trey can make the comeback he so desperately needs. However, we now see a true final score upon us, as Blake absolutely gets the job done. Final score, 130-112. Blake, starting this year's power ranking at number 11, finds himself near the top of the pack at spot number 6 for this week. Although Sutton and Ingram both had very unfortunate weeks, his success with his running backs continue to prosper, as clearly those are his biggest factors in his success. Anything can still happen, and with 0 running backs on his bench, if one goes down, it could be all over. In the meantime, Blake's to keep this momentum going. As for Howitt, an unlucky week in my eyes can't fully determine his spot on the year. Derrick Henry with only 2 points surely is not him. And with that being said, Howitt still finds himself at number 3 on this week's power ranking. Until other factors prove me wrong here, Howitt is still the team to beat moving forward. And as we near the end of Monday Night Football, we find all games are now concluded. Let's jump into the final score of Devin and Adam's matchup, being 114-90 Adam. Hampton and Meyers could only combine for 17, 27 less than what Devin needed, as he falls short to Adam. Devin now finds himself at number 7 on this week's power ranking, as he goes 1-1. Although a loss, he ends up moving 1 spot. Although an unlucky turn of events for some players, if this trend with Omarion Hampton continues to proceed, this team will look to fall very flat on its face. Could we possibly see Bijan being moved? Where Adam, as well having not the greatest of scoring weeks, still gets the job done, as he now stands 2-0 and still with the number 1 spot in this week's power ranking. Josh Allen and Jefferson only combining for 22 points isn't going to be the normal, and even with this shortcoming, still finds other players to help out. Adam is still the team to beat, as he now looks to power through anyone who stands in his path. We now look into yet another matchup where we find Zach able to pull off the 11-point comeback, with the final score 122-107. Zach, able to pick up his first win of the year at 1-1, continues to keep chugging along. However, with his rookie running backs continue to trend downward, Zach is going to have to find someone or something else to fill in those spots. Although his receivers and his ever-growing success with Herbert continues, I worry his running back room could be running out of time, as Zach moves down to spot number 5 on this week's power ranking. As for Nick, his entire team is in shambles. Although Lamar and Chase look to keep having amazing weeks, the rest of his squad aren't showing much promise. And if we see Lamar or Chase ending up with a bad week like we saw before, things could get ugly very soon. Not to mention, Jamar Chase's favorite quarterback is now sidelined for the foreseeable future. Nick will remain to find himself at number 12 on this week's power ranking. Lastly, we see the absolute unthinkable, as we now see that Trey has overcome Jake somehow, some way. Final score, 87-80. Albeit a very gross matchup to look at here, it is incredible that Trey ends up coming back, as Dicker and Najee both combine for 15 points to seal the deal. Although, even with Trey's win tonight, he still ended up finding himself starting an RB2 just to fill the lineup. He will fall at number 9 in this week's power ranking. As for Jake, starting the year as the number 2 ranked overall team, is now 0-2 and scoring the least amount of points so far in the league. Therefore, he will now find himself ranked number 11 in this week's power ranking. Unlucky? Sure. But not being able to find more than 92 points in consecutive weeks cannot go unnoticed. Is it unlucky? Absolutely, but until proven otherwise, he finds himself as a very easy target moving forward. We now go to take a look at the current division standings as we see the new introduction of the good, the bad, and the ugly. These divisions were formed from last year's team ranking from wins, losses, and fantasy playoff success. Teams listed in the good division were teams ranked 1 through 4, the bad division ranked 5 through 8, and the ugly being teams finishing 9 through 12. Thank you all so dearly for joining us this week. Do you agree or do you disagree? Leave a comment down below, and I hope to see you all next week. Do not miss out.